for those of you that don't know, which is pretty much everybody, Jim is a valued member of our bar trivia team known as Airdrop Your Nudes. And also is a valued employee of the United States Postal Service. And we're happy to have him here.
Good to be here.
Yeah. First thoughts, Sean. How you living, man?
Living good. Just managing these times over here. A positive take on this first take is we're trying to find like a routine back at home. So I have a 12-year-old daughter, and so what we did is we took a little family trip to the bookstore the other day. Each of us three picked out a book, and then we kind of dedicate 30 minutes throughout the day where we sit in the same, like in the living room, we read, and then we kind of do like a share out. So like we ask questions like, hey, what's going on in your book with the characters or whatever. So you're almost kind of like reading 3 books at once a little bit.
I'm into that.
Yeah, but I mean it's pretty cool. I like it. It's been really enjoyable, and it kind of gives us somewhat of a routine, I guess you could say.
We got family notes today on the show. Jim, man, how's it going? What's up?
It's going pretty good now. Just recovered from some COVID issues myself.
My bad.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Sean and I are really close. Yeah, my wife too. So she also was stricken with the COVID, and for all we know, my daughter too. But she's bulletproof, so nothing really bad happened to her.
Any first thoughts, man? What's what in this fine country of ours is grinding your gears or inspiring you or not inspiring you?
Well, grinding my gears, I don't know. Grinding my gears is the disrespect I see a lot for my employing agency, the Postal Service. All this aid that came out, for essential workers and companies and agencies that need money. Our good friend Donald Trump very specifically excluded the Postal Service from any and all aid, which was a real slap in the face, because the only reason really that we're screwed financially, everybody makes a lot about the Postal Service being financially strapped. That's because of a 2006 law that requires the Postal Service to pre-fund retiree health benefits 75 years into the future. So people who haven't even been born yet, their retiree health benefits are covered. Well, the impetus behind that is the justification for that was they want it pre-funded for 10 years at $5.5 billion a year. Postal Service never once had an extra $5.5 billion a year. That's where all that loss comes from.
Okay. Shit, man. So kind of on that note, man, I guess I've become known at this point for not having the most positive outlook on where we're at. Imagine that. But it's when we're talking about these, not just loans, but payouts from the government to not just to different agencies, but different businesses and employers, man. Just so you guys know, so far about $7 billion of that has gone to churches, religious institutions. Nancy Pelosi's husband is another notable recipient of that,
and certainly worth it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. And then also everybody's favorite new presidential candidate, Kanye West's Yeezy brand, also received a PPP loan because that's super important.
The man is struggling.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the most average Americans received $1,200, if they qualified. So that's kind of it's worthy of calling to attention. I mean, the church thing to me is a no-brainer. If you're not a tax-paying entity, then how are you eligible for that? Also, maybe you shouldn't be a business. But yeah, we're seeing some of the nation's largest haves receiving quite a bit of relief from the government. A lot of the have-nots not receiving anything, and then, like you said, something that's actually quite essential, not receiving anything. So, a bit bothersome. But moving on, kind of into our news segment. The 4th of July just went down. I don't know if you guys noticed.
I heard about that.
Did you guys celebrate?
Oh, we went to a small gathering. Went to a little barbecue. They had little fireworks and stuff. It was nothing huge, damn it. Okay.
Okay.
Nothing huge. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't a pool party and shit,
Flouting
right?
the law. Okay.
But yeah, I went to a small gathering. It was nice to just see some friends that we hadn't seen certainly in a long time. But did it outside most of the time, so did it in a responsible fashion, I guess you could say.
Fair enough. Jim?
Yeah, we the family and I went out to park at the La Cantera parking lot and watched the fireworks at Fiesta, Texas.
Nice.
And
Getting it done, you know.
That was one of the. It was a very brief show. It was like 10 minutes, which is among the shortest I've ever seen, but it was among the best I'd ever seen.
Nice.
So they packed
Okay.
a lot in there. I was really impressed by it. It was a good time.
Well, yeah, you guys are friends, so I'm also sure you noticed this. But if you guys didn't notice this, the president gave a rousing speech at Mount Rushmore.
Oh yeah, there's some other stuff going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Kind of wanted to get some takes on that. I personally, the transcript of the speech, it's not his worst.
No, not by far. It's as far as I'm concerned, it's one of his best.
Yeah, not his worst, but just it wouldn't be great by anyone else's standards. It was on Indian land at Mount Rushmore, as you know, and I guess there were protests by natives there that did not want that to go down.
Yep.
And the speech went on, and it was pretty much to a large degree talking about heritage for most of it, if I'm not mistaken, and it was kind of an American history lesson by somebody that you would not want to teach you history. But Sean, what do you think, man?
Definitely. I think just the simple fact that we're complimenting this speech from a speechwriter of Donald Trump's is evident in itself that the bar is set pretty low. Let's be honest here, right? And I've said this time and time again, for everybody that thinks that this podcast or the American public in general is too hard on Donald Trump, let me just remind you that he only has to do a few things to get reelected, whereas his counterpart, Biden, still has a long way to go in that regards. But taking it back to the speech at on the July 4th, I didn't watch it live, but I did check out the transcript that you can find on whitehouse.gov. I don't usually send people to whitehouse.gov during this presidency. But again,
what really?
Yeah, but I do think it's important for you to see it for yourself instead of letting the mainstream media digest it for you and tell you what you should take from it. I do understand the importance of people analyzing, the content of the speech for themselves.
Well, and those are, I mean, to me, a phrase that I try my hardest to live by is like be informed, not influenced.
Yeah,
and if you can watch or read something directly as it happens, that's about the closest we can hope for at the moment. But Jim, thoughts from that?
Well, he very, in my eyes, very clearly was trying to focus mostly on American exceptionalism. He wanted to get the crowd behind him for that. And he tried to, as hard as Donald Trump can, tried to avoid very glaring inflammatory language. You did mention the heritage point.
Yeah.
And lately with monuments being threatened and defaced and destroyed, when do we hear the word heritage mentioned most? It's by people who love that Confederate flag.
Yep.
Yeah.
When they're complaining about Confederate statues or other memorials being destroyed.
It's not about the founding fathers further back, is it?
Well, the people are destroying statues of the founding father Jefferson and Washington because they held slaves, but they're not being celebrated because they held slaves. They're being celebrated for completely other reasons. It's kind of an aside. Oh, by the way, they also held slaves, and it's a little bit embarrassing. The Confederate leaders that are being whose memorials are being complained about the destruction of, the only reason they're being celebrated is because they were Confederate leaders. And what was the Confederacy? It was about making sure that they perpetuated slavery for as long as it was possibly could be.
I mean, I think it's peculiar. It stands out to me. I would argue that most people paying attention to the speech, and whether you tuned in live or looked at the transcript or checked it out later, I think that because of the way the last 3.5 years have gone, irony is almost dead in this country. Like it's almost dead. And what I mean by that is, if you can have a president that that can say this is the nation of Andrew Jackson, and you say that on Indian land on July 4th at an event that the Native Americans that lived there did not want to happen. and you say this is the nation of Andrew Jackson, it's another signaling thing to me, because the architect of the Indian Removal Act, one of the most racist presidents of many that you could imagine, and it's like he goes out of his way to celebrate that, and so it's like, I don't need you to trash him, but it was peculiar to me. And
to mention him specifically as somebody whose legacy should be
exactly,
honored
like
on
he's
that
mentioning
day.
him
It's a real
with
slap in the face. Absolutely.
Exactly. And then finally, I just, there's no real message of unity, and so it's like, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you're Nixon, it doesn't matter if you're Clinton, it doesn't matter if you're Woodrow Wilson, no matter which party you come from, you would imagine that the American president would have some sort of message of unity, even if things were going well, right? Like even if things were totally fine, you would imagine there would be more than one mention of unity in a speech, that long.
Well, I told you earlier, and for the people at home, like back when I was in college writing papers, I would commonly, like when I was finished with my paper, before I'd submit it, I would control A, select all, and I'd run it through this website that would kind of tell you, like, how many times you used a certain word. And so, like, I typically do that because you can kind of get good indicator of the tone of your whatever, it's a letter or an assignment, whatever it might be, your paper. And I ran Donald Trump's speech through this same application, if you will, and he only mentions the word unity one time. And heritage, which we've talked about earlier, it's synonymous with Confederate leader. He mentions heritage and defending heritage over 7 times in his speech. And so I understand where the left is coming from. Again, like, I'm going to tell you, be critical when you get things, when you read a CNN article or a headline, and, you don't have to believe every last bit, but I do understand, the cries from the left that are saying, that it is kind of inciting some sort of cultural war. Like, there is a little bit of truth to that.
Yeah. Heritage by itself, in a vacuum, you hear the word heritage and you think, oh, that's a good thing, right?
It's not overly offensive
There's
to me.
There's nothing
no.
wrong with the word heritage, but right now, the word heritage is being used in a certain context.
Yeah.
And for him to use that word that often in that speech, he was clearly speaking to those people who.
Well, it wasn't an accident.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that's kind of what it's devolved to, right? Is the signaling to the people that are going to vote for you. So whereas a regular presidential candidate is attempting to reach out to demographics or to pockets of voters that you might not get, or that you feel like you have a chance at getting, at the moment, it seems like everything is a signal to that, whatever it is, 30% of the population that would vote for him if he shot a guy on camera. So he's signaling to them. But I mean, speaking of division and speaking of this hellscape that we're now living in, socially anyways, there was another, speaking of like giant stone monuments and division, Stone Mountain in Georgia saw a really big demonstration, and a very unique demonstration, I think. And for those of you that maybe aren't aware, Stone Mountain is a state park in Georgia, seemingly really nice, naturally really beautiful place. But there's a giant stone edifice that has a very particular stone sculpture in it that has the 3 most notable Confederate leaders, that being Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson, all riding their favorite horses. And so it's become kind of a destination for not just Confederates, but as of 2017, it was the most visited site in the state of Georgia.
It is an impressive site.
It is. No, it is aesthetically speaking. Like, if you don't know who those guys are,
Yeah.
You're like, wow, somebody
spent
did
some
this.
time on this. Huh?
They spent a little time
A
on
little
it.
bit of time.
A little
By
bit
the
of
way,
time.
fun, if in case it comes up in bar trivia, the sculptor who designed and sculpted Mount Rushmore, Gutzon Borglum.
Yeah.
Yes. He also designed Stone Mountain,
No shit.
but he was replaced. There was some kind of contract dispute, so he was replaced before the actual sculpting took place.
The more you know.
The more you know.
But yeah, all 4 Confederate flags fly there. And then this is the most peculiar. So, like, if in your mind you're just like, man, this is heritage, this is just a historical site. The official state opening of Stone Mountain Park was 100 years to the day of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. It was It was also the site in 1915, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The second, so there's 3 levels of like KKK revival in America, and the second one was in 1915, kind of around the time that Birth of a Nation came out. Stone Mountain was a huge rallying point for that cause as well. So at Stone Mountain, there was an armed group, not Black Panthers actually, but of maybe numbers I saw said in between 600 and 800 armed African Americans. They're from a group called the Not Fucking Around Coalition. Yeah.
Cut to the chase, man. Cut to the chase.
They're pretty serious.
Yeah, NFAC. And they went there, I guess, because there was a small group of demonstrators that were there to protect Stone Mountain. And so they didn't go to deface it or anything, but it was basically a show of force. And it's, I think, maybe the largest armed African-American militia that anyone's ever seen. I don't think, I'd have to check this, but I don't think there's ever been a Black Panther gathering that big. So it's just, to me, it was kind of significant because all the debates and all the discussions we've had about the monuments, this is perhaps the biggest Confederate monument, and fortunately there wasn't a clash there. But I don't know, man.
I don't know that it's fortunate because afterwards, as far as I can tell, they were universally described as peaceful protesters, despite the fact that they all had weapons.
Yeah.
So that was purposeful. That nothing happened.
I guess my question is the same that everybody has, and I like that you brought up the point. And you're really clear. Like, we're not talking about the founding fathers here. Okay, we're talking about the founding fathers of the Confederacy, if you will. Right?
Definitely.
You know, these guys aren't up for dispute, in my opinion. Maybe in somebody else's world they could be. But what do you do, since it's not like, you know, it's not a small monument by any means. It's like etched out on the side of a mountain, right? Yeah. And so if you know, the common solution I've always heard is, well, you know, you preserve it in a museum somewhere. But what do you do? What is the answer in this situation where it's not as simple as just getting a crane and removing this piece? Like, what do y'all think is the solution moving forward?
That's probably the best question of the day. What are you going to do with that thing? You just bomb it, you know? What are you going to do, man? Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I don't have the answer.
And I think, you know, they're at some point, you know, Mississippi just figured out that they're supposed to take that Confederate battle flag off of their
maybe it shouldn't be there.
They did in the 90s end up outlawing slavery. So, you know, they're coming around. And in Georgia, I'm sure that they're going to,
well,
something's going to happen.
This is my issue, right? And I think I said it a week ago or whatever on our last show. If it's something that you, in this case, would be very difficult to take down, or you'd have to destroy it. But if we're talking about monuments in general, I promise there are many, many people in this country that would gladly purchase that park if it meant preserving a Confederate monument. So like, and the same thing goes for actual just monuments in cities. The issue is that U.S. taxpayer dollars fund that. So if the state of Georgia owns that, how fucked up is it, and how strange is it? How off-putting is it for a state with even one African-American taxpayer for any of their money and any of their tax dollars at all going to fund something? Or even if you're not Black, if you're a person that just absolutely disagrees with that and sees it as a racist symbol, how is it even a question of like, well, we should use taxpayer funds to maintain this and to use it as a point of profit?
Okay, so a free market economist might say, okay, sell it to somebody.
Yeah, no. Well, on the last show that we had, I was like, man, if you really feel so strongly that this is history and that it must be preserved at all costs, then buy it yourself and make a Confederate theme park out of it. And then everybody that feels like it's that it's not racist and that it's just your heritage, it's like, well, there's a theme park for that, and you can go pay somebody who uses their money and uses your money to maintain it and to keep it alive. But it's like, for it to be a taxpayer funded thing, to me, it's no different than in South Carolina, them flying the Confederate battle flag at the State House grounds until a few years ago, right? So yeah, there's no shortage of racists in this country to buy that shit. It's just a matter of making it a private entity, I think.
And honestly, I wouldn't have a problem if somebody bought it and did that. Go ahead.
No, do it. Do it.
Almost whatever you want, as long as you're not harming anybody. And it could be viewed, I mean, nothing's happened to it yet, but it could be viewed as, if you turn it into a racist, Confederate theme park, you could be viewed as inciting some kind of reaction to that could be turn violent. But if it hasn't happened yet,
Yeah.
there's
been some. I mean, man, I feel like a broken record almost on this stuff, but there's been a real disconnect as far as when it comes to the monuments, or when it comes to the division that we see in the country between Republicans and Democrats. The thing that I absolutely can't stand to hear, like if I had to say that one thing triggers me, and it's from a historical perspective, even just as much as it is from a race perspective, the thing that sets me off the most is when you see people say, number one, this is about heritage, and saying that the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln. And it's like those things don't match up. And then also, it's just like, man, you really don't understand that there was a massive shift in this country between parties. So like when I would say Harry S. Truman was probably the pioneer of that, when he was trying to desegregate the military. And then later on with Kennedy, with Johnson, with Civil Rights Act and stuff like that, there was a massive exodus of Southern Democrats to the other party. Like, shout out, it says like Strom Thurmond being the big name there, but there's a huge shift. And then with Nixon later on, the Southern strategy, it was like they were pulling Southern Democrats to the other side. So it's like it's so common to see people say, a picture of the KKK. It's like, well, they're all Democrats, or the slave owners were Democrats. It's like, well, you're right, but it's like you stopped reading the history book at that point, because there was a massive fucking shift that you didn't notice.
If they don't understand at this point, it's because they don't want to.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's not. This isn't by accident. Like, it's exactly like you said. Like, maybe if you finish the book on history, maybe towards the later chapters.
Finish the chapter. Like, get off your cliff notes.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of confirmation bias going on there. As soon as they found something that supported their point, they stopped reading.
Yeah. So, kind of moving on here to, I guess, something a bit more contemporary, and by contemporary I mean the last 2 days. The Supreme Court has another wave of rulings that have come out and kind of made a big splash. And so you guys, if you've been paying attention, congratulations. I salute you. If you haven't been, here you go. But Supreme Court's come out, and just real quick, in regards to the Electoral College, they basically said that there can no longer be faithless electors, and that those people must vote accordingly with the popular vote in that state.
Well, strictly speaking, the decision said that states have the right to punish electors who don't vote accordingly.
Define punish.
It sounded like they could still be a faithless elector, but they're going to receive some sort of punishment, right? That's what
do you get publicly lashed, or do you get put in the stocks? How does that work?
Well, in Colorado, I believe. Well, it happened in Colorado, and it happened in Washington State in 2016. And Washington State, I believe, fined their electors $1,000. That I think there were 4 electors.
It's kind of a cheap price to pay.
Yeah, $1,000 to swing the election.
So I can buy the election for $270,000.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
For those of you at home that don't know what a faithless elector is, if your state, or your candidate wins a particular state, if you're not Nebraska or Maine, right, Jim, then that candidate will receive all of the state's electoral votes. Faithless elector is somebody that, one of these electors that takes it upon themselves to go against to
go rogue.
Yeah, to go against the voters, go rogue, if you will, and cast their vote for a different candidate.
Yes, there is no law that requires the elector to vote for whoever the popular, but except for Nebraska and Maine, whichever party's candidate wins the popular vote, the electors are chosen from that party.
Yeah.
So that means that in Washington State, Hillary Clinton won Washington State, but 4 electors from the Democratic Party said no, and they voted for somebody else.
Yeah.
Or they cast their votes for somebody else. And then in Colorado, that elector was replaced with another elector who was not a faithless elector. So those are the 2 punishments.
Okay.
And they both, all of those electors filed suit saying there's nothing in the Constitution or anywhere else that allows you to punish me for not voting that way. And there's nothing in the Constitution that requires me to vote a particular way.
And so now there's a law that says it.
Now there is.
Yeah. The next one that's fairly notable, a few pipeline permits were not renewed, one on the East Coast, and then the more infamous one being DAPO, the Dakota Access Pipeline, pending environmental testing. And so in a normal, sane, rational world, I would say that, of course, they're going to see that it's detrimental to the environment. But so this is either very successful and very positive, or it's just kind of delaying the inevitable until somebody lies enough to get it back up and running.
Most likely it's
The latter.
kicking the can down the road because the Supreme Court doesn't really care about the environment. They care whether, on paper, they care whether some piece of
The
some law,
legality of it
violates the Constitution.
Yeah, I kind of remember, and this is worth saying because I mean, there's no shortage of Trump bashing on this podcast, but
Let's go, man.
we also don't hold back from the other side as well. And
If
so
they need it, absolutely.
what I really remember, and it's like right now, a few weeks ago, we were very serious about talking about police brutality, and still are, from the current social unrest. But something that I remember very, very, very vividly is the Native American protesters that were protesting Dakota Access Pipeline that were sprayed with hoses. They had dogs sicked on them. They were tear gassed and all those things. And it was kind of like the Obama administration kind of turned the other cheek to that, turned away, turned a blind eye to it. And so that for me, it was at least a small victory to see that the pipeline did not get their permit renewed just because of what those people had to go through to defend their land from being destroyed to an extent. So it's like back in the day, it was like, well, we're taking all your land and here's a reservation and here's this land that you have to stay on. It's like, well, okay, but eminent domain is gonna take precedence if there's oil there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was at least a little bit positive to see the Supreme Court rule in their favor for the moment.
For the moment.
Yeah. Another one, Jim, there was one specifically that we talked about, I think, in California.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. What was that?
Well, there were a couple of Catholic schools who had fired teachers.
Right.
In one case, a teacher was fired in her eyes because the school wanted to hire a younger teacher.
It's cheaper that way, right?
It is cheaper.
Yeah.
It's cheaper. And
So what's the problem?
potentially could be some other. Well, apparently there's an age discrimination law. Anyway, the teacher filed a suit claiming that there was a violation of that law. And in the other case, the teacher she missed a lot of work,
Right.
which ordinarily you'd expect an employer, to do something about that. Except this employee, she missed a lot of work because she had breast cancer and she was undergoing treatment. Okay, so she's disabled, and ordinarily an employer can't take adverse employment action against somebody in that situation. There is, however, a ministerial exception. The ministerial exception is for religious organizations. The First Amendment prohibits religious organizations, prohibits a law from applying to a religious organization with respect to ministerial obligations. So,
And that's
the
basically
teachings of their faith.
right. And that's basically what they do for a job anyways.
Well, their point in their lawsuits was that as teachers, they weren't ministers. They were teachers. And so that part of that exception didn't apply to them. So the discrimination aspect did apply. And the Supreme Court said no. Based on the fact that you teach Bible study to these kids, you lead them in prayer, you minister to them, and although
You're a minister even if you don't get the uniform.
they did enough ministerial work in their jobs to qualify for the
So
ministerial exception
they ruled in favor of the schools.
of the school, and I think it's important. And again, from a free market perspective, if I'm a parent and I have a choice, obviously, of where to send my kid to private school. Am I going to pick this school that fires people who are stricken with cancer, or just because they're old?
Probably
The
not.
market, I'm a big fan of voting with my wallet, and I would take my kids out of that school.
Yeah.
So,
But you
the law says
but
you're
you
right,
still
but
yeah.
screw you.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a really good example, I think, of when maybe a ruling is technically correct.
Exactly.
It's technically correct, but it doesn't make the institution not an asshole.
I had to take a shower after I read it because it felt so dirty. But after my shower, I realized technically it's not wrong.
Yeah, there's so many fine lines when it comes to church and state, and so it's kind of I don't know, it's a strange thing, because like what I opened with, I disagree very, very strongly with churches getting even a cent of any sort of government bailout money, but in this case, you can't really. It's tough to argue that they're in the wrong. They're free to do that, even if they are being dicks about it.
Right, and I'm actually glad that they're publicly being called out, or being, the public is being notified of these particular schools having done that.
Yeah,
because now, as a parent, give those schools the finger.
Yeah,
I'm not sending my kid there
for sure.
Hell no. But now to the big dog of the cases, the one that's getting the most press.
Oh,
we only bring you the most current, hottest shit on the news. The biggest one is that the Supreme Court is upheld a 2017 executive order from Mr. Trump, exempting employers from having to provide contraception in their health care for employees. So just the direct impact of that, they're predicting 70 to 120,000 women are now going to be without access to contraception through their healthcare plans. And I think it passed, it was 7-2, and the only two dissenting opinions were Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sotomayor. So 2 of the 3 women, but like we talked about earlier, it might as well have been all 3.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, man. It's like it's 2020, and even if it wasn't 6 men, that would, like 5 men can still determine that the outcomes that are going to impact. In this case, it's only at most it's about 120,000 women. Thankfully, it's not more. But these 5 men, even there's 6 on the current Supreme Court, but these guys can make rulings that come down and affect over 160 million women, possibly. And I still feel like there's something fundamentally wrong with that. If you look back at all of our Supreme Court justices throughout history, you're going to start scratching your head when you figure out, the first time we had a woman was, just a couple of decades ago, and so that continues to be a problem. So it's my understanding, again, that these are private companies that are saying, it's against my religious views to have to provide some sort of healthcare coverage that is going to extend contraceptive care. Is that correct?
Yes. So that's the entire basis for them upholding that executive order is based around religious freedom. So it's to say that if an employer cites a religious reasoning for not wanting or not believing in providing contraception or access to it through their healthcare, that they don't have to.
Yeah.
Which for me personally is astounding. But Jim, what do you think?
Well, again, from a free market perspective, if I know going in that my employer doesn't cover that, or my insurance won't cover that, then I'm going to have to come up with some other way, right?
I guess that's fair to say.
We have capitalism is strongly represented on the show today, guys. It is a first, but it is. So what would you say, I suppose, just from a free market perspective, but also from a human perspective, what would you say to somebody who's had a job for a very long time at a place and everything's been fine until 2017 with that executive order? Now they don't have access to it. What do you say to that? Find a new job, or what do you think?
Well, what does it cost? What does it cost to provide those things? And if those things, if the people, if the agencies, the entrepreneurs who run the companies who provide those things, those products and services,
right?
If they don't have any people because nobody can afford it, they're going to have to lower their price.
Yeah,
they're going to have to make it affordable.
That what I think is peculiar about this, man, is if we're talking about the party that's behind this. So I'm trust me, I'm above pointing fingers at one party or the other. I don't like either one of them. But if we're talking about the party that over the last 30 years has been unanimously the primary mover against women's access to contraception it's the Republican Party, like hands down. It's a conservative interest in this country. It's a religious interest in this country. What always has really been peculiar to me, though, is that if you don't have access to those things, that increases the likelihood of getting an abortion, which I don't know if you guys noticed, they're also strongly against that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're against sex education in schools, largely. You're against women having access to contraception through their healthcare plans, and you're also against abortion.
But remember, there's I'm not one of them, but
Right.
they're not necessarily against contraception. They're against compulsory contraception included in insurance health coverage.
Right. And that's, like I said, that's a thing that a lot of lobbying money gets put at people's disposal for, right? Is to make sure that these things can't happen. And so what they would argue is, oh, well, it just shouldn't come from the government. Well, we hear that also with Planned Parenthood, with people talking about, well, my tax dollars shouldn't have to pay for abortions. It's like, well, they don't actually. But it's the same thing with Planned Parenthood. From what I see personally, is the party that's behind most of this stuff. They don't want any of these things to come from the government. They don't want any sort of funding, any sort of influence to come from the government on these issues. Mm-hmm. But then so it's all about the sanctity of life, except when those kids are born into poor families and into black and brown families, then it's like, oh, well, good luck, right?
Yeah.
And
right,
that's where my
been carried to term. You're on your own.
Yeah. That's where my issue's at. So I
have big problems with that too, of course.
I have a solution for you guys.
Okay.
We just gotta flip the whole system on its ass.
I thought you were gonna say flip a coin.
No, we're flipping the whole system on their ass. Get rid of employer provided healthcare. This shit is outdated at this point. Go single payer, like a certain candidate.
Yeah, there's a certain guy from Vermont that was talking about that shit for a long time, but I don't know if you heard of him.
And not only do you solve the issues that we're talking about today, as far as, hey, I'm an employer and I reserve the right to invoke my First Amendment, and you can't force me to provide this because of my religious views. All that stuff is out the window at this point. You go single payer.
Yeah.
It's not an issue. During a pandemic where 30 plus million Americans lost their jobs, and at the same time, simultaneously, they lose their healthcare coverage. It's not an issue at this point.
But Sean, if we do Medicare for all or single payer, how are we going to pay for Kanye's bailout and Nancy Pelosi's husband's bailout and the church? How are we going to bail out the churches, Sean?
I don't have all the answers, Justin. I don't have all the answers. But for the people that do say that, well, I don't want my tax dollars cut, I looked up TRICARE. I'm not as sharp as you guys. I got to do more research than you, but I looked up TRICARE, the military benefits, and in there are contraceptives. So you're already, like it or not, you're already paying for this shit. So get over it. Get over your feelings at this point. It's going to happen one day or the other. If you think that this is the hill that you want to die on, that, hey, man, I'm a business. We're not forcing you to fucking take a pill. We're talking about the people that work for you. Do you want to spend more money training new employees, or do you want to make sure that, a woman that is not ready to have a family can control that part of her? To me, it's that simple. It doesn't go anything. It's not past that. It's hardly political at all. Like, come on.
Well, so this is going to sound a little crazy, but I'm not opposed to a single payer program. It's alarming.
Welcome to the dark side.
It's alarming that somehow it's managed to work everywhere it's been tried. So why couldn't we do it? Are we not the greatest country in the world? Do you think we can't figure it out? You think the people in this country can't figure it out?
Well, no, I mean, that's the thing. The other day, like, again, I really strongly, I feel this very strongly. Irony is nearly dead in this country because Trump, if you're asking me, do you watch the president's tweets? It's come to that. But earlier he's talking about, well, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Netherlands are all opening schools again. And it's like, well, yeah, they are. But they also all have single payer, and their cases of COVID are really far down. And even if they were high, they'd be able to manage it. And it's like there's no sense of irony there, because he doesn't understand why those countries are doing well and why certain things are no concern. It's because they have single payer and because the system is created to protect the people.
Yeah.
It's not without its flaws, but do we not have flaws now?
Yeah.
Well, I would say so. A trip to the hospital costing, $10,000 plus for any sort of a medical emergency.
Talking about the
That's on the low
pitfalls
end.
of the American healthcare system. Super painful. Speaking of pain and discomfort, if you guys have it in any way, shape, or form, you should go to Natural Heights. They've got all your CBD stuff. They've got all your CBD oil, CBD products. You can find them at 1880 Nacogdoches Road. If you need to call ahead because of shifting hours and COVID concerns and all that, it's 210-592-1060. But yeah, the CBD stuff, as we've mentioned before, it might be better than certain pharmaceutical stuff.
But we need to get your dad to do a plug, a country CBD plug.
I gotta get that. I swear.
I like that.
We mentioned it a while back, but like my dad is about as South Texas as they come. Like hard, yeah. like a very, very, very cool blue collar, soft spoken dude. And the last person I would have ever thought would have some CBD stuff. And I went over to his house one day and he had a thing, like some spray or something. And I'm like, what the hell is this, man? What's going on here? Dude just says, yeah, my friend gave it to me and helps me sleep.
There you go.
So well, there you go. We're making progress.
Catch the wave, man.
Yeah, catch the wave. We're making progress. So yeah, man. What else? I think now we're kind of moving on into the sports world. So for those of you that have been just sitting at home or sitting on your phones or laptops saying, man, I really hope these jackasses stop talking about news and politics and
Boring.
stuff. Yeah, I hope they get to the sports already. This is your time.
Let's tell fat jokes.
It won't be devoid of social issues, but it'll have some sports in there. So the first one that kind of stuck out to all of us is five-star center, 5-star recruit, one of the best players in the nation, Makur Maker. That's Thon Maker's cousin, a current NBA player from Australia's cousin, committed to Howard University.
He's tall.
Yeah, he is a bit tall. Committed to Howard, which is an HBCU. He is the highest ranked player to ever do that since they started the star ranking systems. It's a huge deal, and it kind of started with the number one player in the nation for not next year, but the year after that's class. Mentioned, kind of went viral for saying, well, if anybody's going to profit off of me playing for them, it should be my own people. And so he started the HBCU talk. And so he hasn't committed anywhere. He hasn't really courted anybody yet. But those two guys may be starting a wave. And so that's kind of a very, very interesting trend because normally guys rank that high. They're going to the Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Kansas commits, UCLA, and on that line. And now you've got guys committed to HBCUs and that will fill up the stands at those places and might kind of change college basketball a bit.
I'm kind of embarrassed, like as a high school basketball coach myself, I'm kind of embarrassed to not know the names of some of these top recruits. Like my players will come up to me at practice or something or athletics and they'll say, hey coach, did you see where, such and such 5-star recruit signed? And I'm like, who? Like, I don't even know this guy's name, man. I'm too busy trying to figure out how to get these, 1-star recruits to box out, man. But I think it is interesting that these guys are using their voice and more, I really feel like, hopefully not too far in the future, we're going to look back at that shut up and dribble comment and just be like, you dumb bitch. Like, we're so far past that. And I really think that the modern athlete is kind of evolving, hate it or love it. I understand that for some people sports is their outlet. And for those people, they're probably not listening to this podcast anyways, because we talk so much about current events and social issues, but you're not these guys aren't excluded, like issues. Somebody, these guys make millions of dollars. They don't know what it is to be oppressed. Like, no, they did come from neighborhoods and they have experienced these things. And for you to try to take away from their experiences just kind of shows you like how out of touch you are. But just kind of taking it back to this, it's interesting to see, do you think this is going to be a rise for HBCUs? Is this going to be some sort of trend where you could see them somehow competing year in and year out with these blue blood programs like the Kentuckys and Carolinas? I'm not sure. I think it's interesting to look at. What I'm more focused on is I thought there were I thought we were going to see more of a trend of them taking that, that G League route, because you can go straight from high school to the pros at this point, right?
But Jimmer, what do you think?
I think it's a huge risk for this guy. It's a huge risk. I love that he did it, and I'm hoping it works out so more people do it. But this is a huge risk. Remember, when high schoolers started to come out directly to the NBA, they first
not all of them made it.
They panned out. A few of them panned out. Kevin Garnett, Kobe. I've heard of those guys.
Yeah.
I don't know who are these other. There are a couple of yokels that I can't even name because they sucked so bad.
Well, yeah, there are guys that had rough NBA goes, and then after 2 years they're gone, and
right.
Now you can't go back to college. You can't. There's a lot of stuff you can't do. Like even getting a job overseas is tough.
And remember, these HBCUs, none of them is in any kind of conference that anybody cares about come March Madness time.
Well, no, and there's
a reason for that, because they're typically they don't attract that kind of talent. This guy shows up, and if this turns Howard into something, because the only reason they're going to be on TV is because of him.
Yeah, you got to.
If he doesn't deliver,
you got to deliver. You got to win.
It's never going to happen again.
Yeah. And that's, for me, man. I think when you're talking about HBCUs, I like it just the same as Jim said. I really like the move. I think it's important. Culturally, it's really huge. But
so ballsy.
Yeah, and that's how I would describe it. But when it comes down to it, it's America. It comes down to money. And it also comes down to winning. So if Howard has a badass season and really just does some huge things, they make the tournament, and he single-handedly changed the culture, great. But when it comes down to it, I don't know if it's enough to shift all the best players in the country to go, all the best African-American players to go to HBCUs. Just because I kind of know the way kids think. And right as of now, whether it's Howard, whether it's Jackson State, doesn't matter. Whether it's Alcorn State, any of these HBCUs won't be able to compete money-wise when it comes to. So yes, you're on full scholarship, but facilities,
right?
University itself, player special facilities for the players, trainers, everything is going to be much better at the high majors regardless. And it's tough to sway kids to come there in mass. So, I mean, he might do it. And then Mikey Williams is the number 1 ranked kid, I believe, for 2022. And it's like, if he does it, that might influence some more. So this Maker is a 5-star, but if Mikey does it, that actually might change things just because it's the top ranked player.
I think Jim brought up a good point. Like, who are these HBCUs playing? And I'm not saying like I know the strength of their schedule, but if I'm an NBA scout, I need to make sure that you're proven, and these other blue blood programs, they are in these Power 5 conferences, and week in and week out they're playing against top 20 teams and stuff, and so these guys come out and they're league ready at this point, dudes like Zion, and
they're playing against ACC talent or Big Ten talent.
Speaking of Zion, and I admittedly I'm not familiar, and I'm embarrassed to not be familiar with our top 10, just being a basketball coach myself. But I can't tell you, you get so much tunnel vision during the season where you're just worried about watching film in the next game and the scout. But could the right person come along? And I'm not saying this gentleman is or is not, but could the right person come along and make this a huge deal where it's like, no, we do need to see this guy on TV. We are going to televise. I don't care who he's playing. He could be playing some local university out of San Antonio, but we are going to put this TV. We're going to put this game on TV.
Well, Howard is going to be on TV. Assuming we have a season. Howard is going to be on TV because of him, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I don't need Howard to even make the tournament. I need this guy to be what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to dominate everybody in that league. And if he dominates everybody in that league, and hopefully they get some good games against some good competition, and he shows up in those against some 5-star and 4-star recruits on those teams who have actually had some seasoning even.
Yeah.
And if he shows up in those games, he will have delivered.
Okay.
And that's all I want. And that will prompt more people to do it. And this might have some kind of revenue sharing effect where these guys longer.
Wouldn't that be a thing?
It might. It might, because right now they're left without this unless some altruistic 5-star recruit shows up at an HBCU, or it doesn't even have to be an HBCU, just some non-blue blood,
Yeah.
Go ahead, do that.
Fun fact: when I was coming out of high school, I got offered by an HBCU.
That's so awesome.
It was honestly, out of all the visits I took, I ended up going somewhere else. But like,
That's
out
because
of
you're
all,
a racist jerk.
it's not out of all the, but out of all the visits I took, it was the most fun.
You
So
should have gone.
yeah.
I would like you. I would
This
like
is,
you.
hey, all of this
I don't
is
think much of you
considering
right
there's
now.
even a season this fall.
Yeah, that's
Right,
Sean.
yeah.
See, Sean, I'm supposed
Sorry,
to be.
yeah.
Damn it, I'm supposed to be the negative one, and here comes Sean saying we might not have sports this
Yeah,
year, which is
Eeyore.
a legitimate threat.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. But yeah, moving on, man. We've got the NBA restart is this month, and local news with Spurs player Patty Mills came out today and is dedicating his entire salary from the restart, a little bit over $1 million, to Black Lives Matter in Australia. And again, if some of you guys haven't been to Australia or might not know the demographics that well, there's a sizable Aborigine population there and a mixed population there, and they've dealt with quite a bit. And so it's kind of it was a positive thing to see. I think that Patty came out and did that.
I'm gonna go to Patty Mills bars when life returns to normal. Shout out Rupub over there.
Yeah, shout out Rupub. No, that's a big thing. I think, and players now are. I think the conversation a few weeks ago is there's guys sitting out because they feel like the Black Lives Matter and the social activism aspect is more important right now, and that sports detracts from that. And Dwight Howard was one of those people, but now he's agreed to play in the restart for the Lakers, and is also putting a sizable amount of money from his game checks towards a charity that he started. They're along the lines of the same interest. But I think it's interesting because I can't fault anybody for sitting, like we talked about a few weeks ago. I can't fault anybody that's sitting that thinks that maybe sports are a social distraction. But I also really appreciate guys saying, well, I'm going to play. It's my livelihood, but I'm also going to donate a piece of that livelihood to a cause and to hopefully inspire some social racial justice.
Yeah, I don't. Again, man, I really think that the modern athlete is evolving, and if sports was your escape from all the, I'm sorry,
Forget about that.
I don't know where you could go to NASCAR. Oh wait, they've joined the bandwagon too.
Oh, mama.
I'm not sure where you can go. Maybe there's like a cricket league or something going on.
What is that? What right now? I mean, what would you have to say? What is the most? If it's not NASCAR, which it was for about 40 years, like what's the most racist sport still alive? Would you say? That's a fun segment.
I don't know, man. What are we?
Because to be honest, you would choose the sport where there are more Confederate flags than American flags in the crowd, but that's not a thing anymore. So
How
now,
angry were those guys?
who takes that?
God, they were so
They are
mad.
fucking angry. Who takes that? Who takes that role though? I mean, who takes the throne for the most racist sport in the world? What do you think? And you can't say Eastern European soccer because that would have been the answer.
Has there ever been a black national champion bowler? I don't know.
Ooh.
Jim, you're a bowler. What do you?
No, my head looks like a bowling ball, but I'm not. Bowling.
Okay.
I don't know.
Totally different.
It's tough. I mean, I don't. We can't call the sport racist. We would just say the whitest sport is no longer NASCAR. So maybe like Olympic curling.
I'm glad that's a tough question, right? I think that's something to celebrate.
That's a tough. I like that. That's social progress when you can't just pinpoint what the most racist sport is. I mean, before I was arguing that NASCAR isn't a sport, but I mean, I guess I lost that fight. But
I was with you for a long time, but if it were really not a sport, then the winners would all be kind of randomly selected. But the same people kept winning, so there's got to be something.
I guess so. Those guys are just so athletic, Jim. Like that's
Absolutely.
that's the thing. They're physical specimens, and they are very good at turning left.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. You can't do it.
I cannot. I absolutely cannot. That's a good point. The next section in our sports stuff, a lot of you guys are probably thinking, man, these guys are finally done talking social issues and politics. We're not. We're not. Psych. Really, really cool story. Maya Moore, for those of you that don't know, is...
Shame on you if you don't know Maya Moore.
For real. One of the most decorated, best basketball players in the world. Like, easily one of the best women's players that's ever been, probably. And very, multi-time WNBA champion, an MVP, multi national champion at the collegiate level, player of the year, outstanding player,
2-time gold medalist.
Yes, one of the best basketball players on earth. Sidelined her career, like took last year off and sat out from playing this year because she was so inspired to help a guy named Jonathan Irons, who was wrongly convicted of a non-fatal shooting. So not only was it non-fatal, but he didn't do it. Guy's been in prison since 1997.
Yeah,
right?
23 years.
Yeah. So in jail for something he didn't do for 23 years. And so she takes up his case. And I actually don't know if she has a law degree, but either way, she's contributing and she is putting her everything into helping this guy. And now he's been freed. And I can't stress this enough for those that want to keep the two things separate. It's like, well, a lot of people would have never known about that and would have never given a shit about that. And many cases like that. And because somebody so notable, somebody so talented said, hey, this is my livelihood, but it's not as important as a guy rotting in jail for a shooting he didn't do. And I have nothing but respect for what she's done. And it's kind of, to me, that's the crown jewel of any sort of sacrifice or any sort of movement that any current athlete has done.
Yeah, I admittedly wish, when I'm thinking of my GOAT athletes, I kind of wish LeBron was more like an Ali in that sense, where there's some things that are bigger than sports, and just as a coach, man, just like, isn't that what we tell our kids all the time? Like, hey, it's bigger than basketball. It's not just about, if all you're learning to do in our program is how to shoot a ball or box out or dribble, whatever, you're really missing the point. What we're trying to do here. But again, if LeBron just wants to chase rings, then go chase rings, right? But as far as Maya Moore goes, Stephen A. had a pretty cool early take where he said, he's not going to be around for it, but he said, if you want my bid for athlete of the century, he said, I'm going Maya Moore. So I thought that was pretty cool, just paying respects and paying it forward. And it sounds like when you really get into, I haven't gotten into like, the big details of the case, but it sounds like this is just a case of the justice system being just painfully slow of catching up. It sounds like
that's an issue.
There was no physical evidence, obviously, that tied this gentleman Irons to the crime, and there was a fingerprint that they were able to lift. And from what I've gathered, like, they ran the fingerprint much later, like recently, as technology has come around. And that's, I believe that's how they were able to, eliminate him from doing the crime. But there's, for the one story that we are hearing, how many other people are still, rotting behind bars at this point because somebody hasn't stepped away from their career.
Scary. That's the really scary part. To be fair, we actually don't know that this guy didn't do it, do we? We know that the prosecution fell far short of proving that he did it. And they withheld that evidence. That fingerprint evidence was like available.
Reasonable doubt.
Well, no. So if you say, so if we're talking about reasonable doubt, and we're talking about things that would normally hand somebody a mistrial or normally hand somebody, an easy, get out of jail card, maybe if they were white, who knows? But those circumstances were ignored in this case. Yeah, and so it's like we don't know for sure that he did or didn't do it, but we know
then he should not have been convicted. Absolutely,
that's correct. That. And so when it comes to Maya Moore, I don't know if people will. I don't know if people are ready to compare it to something like an Ali type sacrifice. But you very much have somebody that's at the top of their game. One of the best, if not the best, women's players that exist. The same as Ali's protest was a bit different, but it's like this one saved somebody's life. This one kept somebody from being in jail from now he's 40 until he's dead, and so I can't
having already spent 22 years, 22 years
wrongfully convicted and spent 23 years in jail.
Sick.
Pay that, man.
So Sean's point is very well taken. You know, how many more are there like this that they don't have a Maya Moore?
No, and she
quitting her
yeah, and I don't even know the
high-paying job.
background of how she came across the case, but it's like that's how fortunate is he? But it's like throughout our history, how many people have been wrongfully convicted with less evidence and under false pretenses and things like that. And it's just those types of stories. It's not that they don't exist for white people. It's not that they don't exist for Latinos or for any other group, but it appears that there is a plethora for one group of people, and you know we
because they fit a description.
They fit they fit a description,
Yep.
and so I can't help but admire somebody that's, you know, if you're a professional athlete at any level, you've arrived, you've reached a really high level. But if you're one of the best in the world at what you do, and you just say, hey, this is not as important as this, and you go and get a man freed, that's a big deal. So
yeah, hey,
It's
I know
huge.
we're gonna
It's
I know
huge,
we're
and I
gonna
love
move
it.
on to UFC, but you said I'm not sure how she met him. Maya Moore actually met the gentleman when she was 18, and it was like a ministry outreach program where they'd go and minister to people in the prisons, and that's how she actually met him, and that's how she first learned of his
oh
story.
wow,
So it wasn't like she just took up this trendy issue where, oh, this guy's already, you know, in this appellate process. Like, and she's known this guy for a while now. You know,
Okay,
she's
well,
30, so she's known him
that's-
for 12 plus years.
that's
at
pretty
this point.
cool. Yeah, I'd argue that would be an example of a successful, a few successful examples of the ministry outreach stuff.
Yeah,
But
well-
yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool that she met him that young and then stayed with it this long. That's really cool.
What took her so long?
Oh, well, she had to gain national fame and notoriety to get
It
to.
wouldn't have meant
and-
anything
yeah,
otherwise.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
absolutely right.
Exactly.
Some 18-year-old kid says, "Hey, I think he's innocent."
So-
Get
so-
out of here, kid.
Yeah. So now we're getting to what Sean has been waiting on this entire time. Like, basically, Sean didn't give a shit about anything that we talked about
Okay.
up until this point. But now we're up to UFC, aren't we?
We are. This is
And-
our UFC update at this
And
point.
and listen, for those of you that are casual viewers, you're about to be not casual after we get done with Sean over here, because he's got everything you need. The card's been updated, is that right? And that's this weekend.
The card has been updated. It is this weekend. That's
Yee.
the biggest news. I will say there's another show on Pub Sports that covers UFC way better than I'm ever going to do.
Well, yeah,
So
we only have
shout
a
out-
few minutes, so yeah.
shout out those guys. But this is arguably the biggest sporting event since the shutdown. You know, Dana White secures an island. You know, he's getting Fight Island over here.
How cool is that, right?
It's-
Hey, Jim and I over here like, bought a fucking island.
He secured an island for this thing, man. I mean, that alone is pretty cool, right? And I guess the biggest news is, you know, the main card has kind of been updated. The challenger for the welterweight title, Burns, you know, he caught COVID and he was out, and stepping up to replace him on very short notice. You know, he's taking a fight in a week notice. Is Jorge Masvidal, which is, you know,
Stay ready. You don't have to get ready.
exactly one of the biggest names in the game at this point. And it's just going to be a show. That card is stacked from top to bottom. You got 3 title fights on it. The co-main event could be the main event in this fight. It's wild. It's gonna be a great time.
You're gonna want to be around Sean during this fight. He's gonna be glued to it. He's gonna be yelling at the TV. It's gonna be a show.
It's gonna be pretty awesome.
So what? I mean, where does UFC stand compared to every other major sport in America? I mean, money wise and popularity wise, you have to include it in the top sports in America at the moment. I think. Where does it stand with what they've done in our changing pandemic times?
I think they're really taking advantage of the opportunities to kind of build their fan base, right? Like I'll be honest, I'm not, you know, if you asked me all the ins and outs of the UFC, I wouldn't be able to answer all those questions. But I do think that, you know, they're getting most of these viewers, these pay-per-view buyers. They're getting a lot of these during this pandemic, where it's almost the only sport on TV. You know, like I watched guys that, you know, they're great basketball players, but, you know, basketball came back to TV this last week with the TBT tournament. And I'm happy to see that. But if I had to choose between watching guys that are, you know, some of them might be professionals playing overseas, No disrespect to you, Justin, but if I had to choose between that and
Get
watching
a load
some,
of this fucking
some
guy. Right?
badass UFC fights, I'm gonna watch that. I'm gonna watch UFC, 10 out of 10 times at that point. And then when the NBA comes back, I'll definitely tune in to the NBA. But it's gonna be exciting nonetheless. This Saturday.
Jim, are you tuned in on Saturday or not?
Saturday's my birthday.
No shit. Oh,
It's a bad one too.
Oh,
Ooh,
what?
It's a bad one.
It's the big one.
I think I know what it is.
Yeah,
It's
I don't like
not-
it. I don't like it.
Well, I mean, I'll drink a beer for or with you, whatever you prefer. But yeah, I mean, what? So as a casual, I take it you're a casual. I take it you're a more casual viewer than Sean.
I'm much more casual than Sean. I usually don't even know when there's a UFC fight. Although I've been to one.
That's fair.
The guys from the other show are just cringing. They're like, "What?
Don't hate me. Don't hate
What are
me.
you talking about right now? What?" So
I was busy reading Supreme Court decisions.
I mean, they've been the first to get back into the swing of things, and I think it's the easiest. You have to have two guys, you have to have a cage, and you've got to have the essential people around. But most of their money is from pay-per-view, anyways. It's not from selling tickets, and it's not from TV contracts.
Right.
It's directly from pay-per-view.
Yeah,
So
certainly not selling any tickets these days.
no, and so it's directly from pay-per-view and hyping the fights and stuff like that. So really, not a ton has changed once you've bought the island. Once you get that small detail out of the way, you're good.
Fair enough.
Once you own an island, you're all right.
I think it's
And whatever pay-per-view revenue you might have expected from a typical UFC fight or a night card, it's the only game in town.
You'll-
so,
Yeah, it's the only thing in
It'll
town.
make up the difference. What I think is cool is at this point, because Dana White's put on a couple of fights at this point during the pandemic. This isn't an experiment anymore. I think the NBA and their bubble and how they're going to navigate all the logistics of that. Clearly, they have way different challenges than a one-on-one combat sport is concerned. But that, to me, that's still an experimental process. Like, is it going to work? We don't know. The NBA could be on for a week, and it could be over if LeBron catches COVID, right? And so it's true.
Don't you put that evil on him?
I don't want
Sean
it to
Spain.
happen, but it's true. But Dana
You
White
put
has
that evil
proved
on him.
Dana White's proved that he can navigate these tough times, and he can still put on a great show throughout a pandemic. So
That's because the viewing public will always flock to people beating the crap out of each other.
that's what I like
Yeah,
to see.
it's a gladiatorial sport.
History has proven that.
So finally, here, guys, we're on our way out, but we're not quite through the door yet. We want to kind of give some. We haven't done this in a very long time, and trust me, there are some fucking cultured people sitting at this table. Let me tell you. So we were going to get some recommendations as far as along the lines of books, movies, TV series, any of that. I'm curious to see what these guys are going to say. I didn't ask them about that. I pulled it out of the hat here. But Sean, what should people be watching, reading, listening to? What should they? I mean, besides the Escape Pod, like, share, subscribe. You get it. But yeah, besides us, what should people be tuning into?
I'm not ready to disclose the book that I'm reading, though. In my house,
Oh, that's bullshit.
it has ranked dead last according to my wife and my girlfriend and daughter.
Oh shit, you're on the last.
Oh.
Yeah, mine's the least interesting when we share out. But
50 Shades of Grey. I'm going to go out and ask if that's it. Is that it?
that is not it. On Netflix, which most of us do have, we did watch Athlete A. It's named for the then anonymous gymnast whose complaint led to the first public disclosure of decades of abuse by Dr. Larry Nassar, who is the team doctor. The documentary is extremely interesting. And it kind of shows, how, U.S. gymnastics chose to chase gold medals rather than, concern themselves with the well-being of their athletes. So it's extremely interesting. It's, it gets a little bit disturbing, obviously, if you're familiar with what went on with U.S. gymnastics. But
Yeah.
I think they did a great job putting the documentary together. Athlete A.
Jim, what do you got, buddy?
Well, I'm not exactly on the cutting edge of any of this crap. This is all stuff that everybody's already
Netflix,
seen.
what?
Yeah.
Online streaming. What?
Yeah, what are you kids talking about? Crap is this? Claptrap is what it is. Lately, during my COVID isolation, I actually started watching this show called Outlander, which I don't even know if it's still on. But I started watching that show. That's what I'm into, and it's pretty interesting. Ozark, come on.
Oh man, you can't go wrong with Ozark at
Again,
all.
I'm not like breaking any ground here. I'm sure
Everyone
watching's like,
watching's like, I'm sure everyone watching's like, and
Yeah,
we already
hold on.
finished. we
Yeah,
already
but I just
finished."
showed up, man. I just showed up. I just got there.
He's new here.
So,
Yeah.
So I don't really have anything that anybody's going to be surprised by. So.
Well, cool, man. I would have to say at the moment, what I'm reading, nobody listening to this show or watching this show wants to read. It's a bunch of Friedrich Nietzsche. So yeah, I won't even. No, you guys don't care about that. If you do, just hit me up and we'll talk about it. But you don't care about that. Netflix wise, I've seen it probably 3 times by now. Given the social calamity in this nation, if you haven't seen it, the 13th is maybe it's maybe one of the best things Netflix has done thus far. I think. Go watch it. It's about the fallout after the 13th Amendment, after the Civil War, and how it's affected the African American community since then. Very, very good watch. And then finally, kind of what I'm in the middle of right now is a popular series. Sean talked shit about this earlier, but it's called Dark. It's a German series on Netflix, very highly rated. So if you don't mind reading subtitles, or if you listen to the shitty dubbed version,
or if you speak German,
there you go. Yeah, I'm about halfway there. There's certain things I get and certain things I don't. But yeah, Dark is really, really good.
I can definitely endorse your first suggestion.
Sean's a
13th is great.
shithead.
Not sure about the second.
Well, we have time here for final thoughts, and this is not scripted, folks. This is pretty much just what's going through our minds on our way out. I'm going to start with Jim here. This is your first time being on the show, man. Like Jim's a hardened trivia veteran with us. But it's first time on the podcast, man. Did you enjoy it or did you fucking hate it? What do you think?
I had a great time. I probably should have been a little more prepared, but
I feel like the viewers like you. I feel like they like your shirt too.
I got a lot of good feedback.
I got a lot of good feedback already on you.
I actually made this shirt.
No shit.
July 4th. I tie-dyed it myself. Yeah.
You might be a fan favorite, Jim. So
I like that.
It was my daughter's idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Is there anything you want to leave people with, or are you just done?
Be sure to appreciate your letter carrier and maybe give them a nice cold bottle of water.
Yeah, we're doing that ASAP. Sean, what do you got, man? Leave us with something decent here.
Closing thoughts. Abbott came out with the face mask mandate this week. Guys, if you're online, I took a whole week off from, social media for a little bit. But I did see somebody compare it to wearing a gold star, as wearing a face covering
damn it.
is nothing similar to the Holocaust. So stop at that reach. Just be considerate, okay?
Good Lord.
Okay. Sean with an exceptionally short one this evening. Guys, I will leave you with what was mentioned earlier as you're navigating this new life that we all have. Please work to be informed, not influenced. If that means reading something more than once, reading multiple sources, go out and learn something for yourself and not down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole, not down an alternate history rabbit hole. Please work to be informed, not influenced. And I think we'll hopefully see the divide that we're all experiencing here shrink a little bit. That's my hope. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe. We have a Facebook now. We do have a Facebook now.
Promote that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm promoting that like a motherfucker. Like, please like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next week. We appreciate you. This is the Escape Pod signing out.
Oh man, not again.